Hey, I'm Luke, and today we're talking about Crossroads of Twilight, Book 10 of The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. Despite being one of the shorter books in the series so far, there's just a ton of stuff going on inside this book, and I'm really excited to get into it. But before we do, I need to warn you, I'm about to thoroughly spoil this book. If you haven't read it yet, stop watching right now and go read it first. It's fine if you haven't read past it yet, I haven't either, but anything in books 1 through 10 is fair game for spoilers in this video. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get into a summary. Then I'll move on to breaking down the book and analyzing it bit by bit. The various storylines in this book start midway through the last book, Winter's Heart. Each perspective marks, via the characters who can channel, when Rand and Nynaeve begin cleansing Sidon, as it can be felt throughout the world. Though the time jumps make it a little bit tricky to line things up perfectly, by the end of the book, it's nearly spring, and it seems as though we're going to start the next book off roughly synchronized. So, starting off. In the prologue, which was originally released 6 months before Crossroads of Twilight with the title Glimmers of the Pattern, we got a perspective chapter for Rodel Ituralde, known as the Wolf. We've actually heard of Ituralde a few times now. He's a Domani and one of the 5 great captains. We learned that he was a great captain back in chapter 27 of the Fires of Heaven, when he was mentioned alongside Agilmar Jagad, Davrin Bashir, Pater Niall, and Gareth Bryn. In chapter 6 of Lord of Chaos, we saw Grendel take the form of Lady Basine, also Domani, and meet with Ituralde. We didn't see exactly what they discussed, but we know that she was doing this after secretly going to Shia Ghul, and that she intended to sow chaos. Then, in the Path of Daggers, we saw Grendel send a sealed message to Ituralde with the hand and sword seal of Ered Domin. She specifically ordered for human blood on the letter, quote, enough for realism, not enough to spoil what I wrote. She wanted Ituralde to believe that the letter came directly from King Elsalam and that Grey Men had tried to stop it from reaching him. She hid this plan from Morden and the other Chosen, thinking to herself that she wasn't forbidden from doing this specifically, and that she will be nameless in the end. Back to Crossroads of Twilight, Ituralde thinks to himself that King Elsalam has been a friend and a good king, but lately, quote, the orders the king sent could not have been better written to achieve chaos. Thankfully, Ituralde received one good order, quote, one that a Grey Man killed Lady Tuva to stop from reaching him. And he's dodging the king's couriers so that he can commit himself fully to this order. To this end, he offers a truce with the Dragonsworn and Ered Domin so that they can work together to push the Shan-Shan out. Moving on to the White Tower. Saren, Sain, Yukiri, Dosine, and Pavara are still hunting the Black Aja. As the Black Aja organizes itself into hearts, groups of 3, where each member knows the other 2 and also one other Black Aja that the other 2 in her heart doesn't know, they can't yet make any major move, though they did learn that Galena is Black Aja from Talene. This group also notices that the choices for new sitters, raised to fill gaps left by the split, don't really make sense, as they're all far too young. Swan also notices this for the rebels, so this is happening within both halls. The group in Tar Valon conclude that there's a chance that the heads of the Aja are colluding on new sitters, when they shouldn't even officially know who the other heads are. Elviarin returns after being gone for a month to find that Elaida is no longer afraid of her. Elaida openly states that she's building a case for treason against Elviarin, which Elviarin takes to mean that Elaida knows that she's Black Aja. I'm actually not sure whether Elaida even suspects Elviarin of truly being Black Aja, or if she's just confident that she can frame her. Elviarin is no longer Keeper, replaced by Tarna Fair. Recall that we first met Tarna in Lord of Chaos, when she was Elaida's emissary to Saladar. In a panic, Elviarin uses a red rod Terangriel to summon Missana, who is not sympathetic. Missana already knows about what happened, so she definitely has other ways to gather information close to Elaida. While Missana and Elviarin are speaking, Shadowharan enters the room, sealing away the source and terrifying both women. He dispels Missana's disguise, revealing her to be a blue-eyed woman wearing bronze-embroidered green, just short of her middle years and without the Aes Sedai's agelessness. She seems familiar to Elviarin, but she can't quite identify her. Shadowharan punishes Missana for ignoring a summons. He also marks Elviarin as one of his. Missana won't harm her unless Shadowharan grants her permission to do so. He charges Elviarin with finding the group hunting the Black Aja and delivering them to him. Note that I'm pretty confident that we just can't figure out who Missana is at this point. I spent like 2 hours searching through the entire series of books up to this point trying to figure it out. There's not a single person that is in the tower that isn't an Aes Sedai, that's short of middle years. Like, there's nobody that fits this exact description, so maybe I missed something, but I really doubt it. I don't think we can figure out who Missana is now. Moving on to Gawain. Gawain is still with the younglings. They were expelled from the city, disowned by Elaida, but now she wants them back. Gawain is alone in feeling that, since Elaida disowned them, they shouldn't really have any obligation to follow her. The other younglings are still loyal. Gawain doesn't actually stand up for anything, though. He'll still follow Elaida, though we haven't yet seen how this could change given what happens to Egwene at the end of the book. Moving on to the Shan-Shan. We get a perspective chapter for Furik Karede? I'm going to say Karede. Karede, a Shan-Shan Deathwatch guard, and his servant, Ajin Buddha. Karede is a banner general, promoted for success in battle, but the primary responsibility of Deathwatch guards is to guard the royal family, and Karede knows that Tuon is missing. Cadsuane has an attachment to Tuon that he shouldn't have, having specifically requested to be assigned to Tuon multiple times. He also kept a gift from Tuon, her favorite doll, which he gave to him after he saved her life when she was very little, though the doll has been lost in a fire since then. He was struck that even at a very young age, Tuon was, quote, already aware that she might not live to do her duty, yet trying to do it anyway. Almirant Mor, the seeker investigating the conspiracy surrounding Suroth and Egwene, meets with Cadsuane to discuss the conspiracy and Tuon's disappearance, also indicating that some of the seekers above him must be involved. He's aware that Tom and Mad have a connection to Tylan and the Aes Sedai, suspecting that Tom is the leader there. Moreover, Mor is aware that two Damane, former Aes Sedai, were taken from the palace on the same night that Tylan was murdered and Tuon vanished. He suspects that the White Tower may have sent Tom on a mission. Of course, he also knows about the Saddam who left and their connection to Egwene. Recall, since it's been a while since it's come up, that Suroth serves the same master as Liandrin, making her a dark friend. There really is a scandal amongst the Shan-Shan, but Mor hasn't quite put all the pieces together yet. He's still trying to figure it out. The day after meeting with Mor, Cadsuane leaves in disguise to meet with a force of 100 guard, 20 Ogier gardeners in full armor, 2 weeks of supplies on pack animals, 6 Damane, and some Saddam. Among the Damane is Malden, who is favored by Tuon. Malden was once the Aes Sedai Shireen Caemlyn, but now she loves and worships Tuon. The group doesn't know where Tuon's kidnappers are, but they suspect that they're not heading east or going straight north, which is correct, as Matt's group is traveling northeast towards Lugard. Moving on to Rand. Dara, Davrin Bashir's wife, is stabbed by men searching their tents for something. Debrain is also stabbed by men with the same orders. It seems that someone is trying to find where Rand has hidden the 3 seals on Shaitan's prison. Rand is alive after cleansing Side-In, but he's weakened, and he still suffers from bouts of nausea and dizziness when he sees his Side-In. Lews Therin is still in his head, perhaps even more so, and both wounds on his side also remain. Rand also continues to occasionally see a face that he can't quite make out. Also note that Rand, Perrin, and Matt all continue to see a swirl of color and a vague image whenever they think of one of the other two. The image they see isn't clear, but it seems as though they actually are getting a brief glimpse into what the other person is actually doing. Logain is well aware of the schism in the Black Tower and warns Rand that if he doesn't start focusing on the Black Tower soon, he'll come to find the Ashman follow Taim, not Rand. He also explains that Taim ordered the bonding of the Aes Sedai and that he did so in Rand's name. Taim orders many things in Rand's name. Rand is not happy with the Aes Sedai being bonded. Logain knows that Side-In is clean now, but he doesn't actually believe that Rand did it. Nobody actually seems to know or believe that Rand had anything to do with cleansing Side-In, except for those who were actually present, and even those Aes Sedai aren't yet sure whether it actually worked. Elsa and Olivia see themselves as Rand's guardians in a sense. Olivia does so because she credits Rand with releasing her and feels that she owes him. Elsa is still a devout dark friend and zealously believes that she must bring Rand to Tarman guidance so that Shaitan can defeat him there. Rand decides that he cannot fight both the Shan-Shan and Shaitan. He sends Bashir and Logain to meet with the Shan-Shan to forge an alliance. The Shan-Shan are open to talks, but only if Rand meets with Tuon in person. Recall that Tuon plans to bring Rand to kneel before the Crystal Throne and that the Shan-Shan seized the male Adam from Egwene and Dolmen. Moving on to Elayne. Caemlyn is under siege by Armorilla Marn and her supporters. Bashir and Bale's forces are camped nearby, but Elayne doesn't want their support as it would weaken her political position. Similarly, she knows that using the one power to personally attack her enemies would destroy her political position even if she succeeded in defeating the armies arrayed against her. Nobody involved in the conflict actually wants it to erupt into battle. The goal for everyone involved is to try to outmaneuver the rest and put them into a position where they surrender peacefully. However, blunders are still possible and could cost a lot of lives. Elayne has been traveling around the country gathering support. She accepts levies, but her real goal is to simply spread positive awareness of herself. It seems as though Armilla isn't anywhere near this savvy. Elayne is pregnant with twins. She doesn't know the sexes yet, but we know, from Min's viewing, that there'll be a boy and a girl. Brigitte and Aviendha are ensuring that she doesn't eat or drink anything raw or overexert herself, which is extremely frustrating for Elayne. We learn that being able to channel will protect Elayne from birthing sickness, but she'll have trouble channeling throughout the pregnancy, completely losing the ability to channel at all while she's in labor, which doesn't sound ominous at all. This will recover immediately after birth. Brigitte is forgetting her past lives and is terrified that she'll forget Guidal Kane. Vandene is going a little bit crazy with grief for her sister. Elayne publicly dresses down Doylan Mellor for getting into a battle that he didn't need to get into. She's still supporting the rumors that he is the father of her children. Recall that Mellor is an alias of David Hanlon, also an alias, who is working for Millie Skane, who is using the identity of Shani Abraham. Hanlon was promised the chance to rape Elayne and still looks forward to it. There have been a number of arsons in Caemlyn recently. The perpetrator is trying to destroy the city's food reserves. Thus far, Brigitte has been successful in protecting the stores. The attacks were ordered by Skane. The Atha and Mir learn that Nesta Din Ray's Two Moons is dead, killed by Shan-Shan, and they plan to leave to choose the next mistress of ships. Given that the Windfinders have been helping to keep the gateways open for supplying Caemlyn, this would cripple Elayne's military position. Elayne strikes a new bargain. She will cede 1 square mile of good land on the river to the Athon-Mir in perpetuity, subject only to their law, and in return 9 Windfinders will remain to keep the gateways open until Elayne is queen. They will not take part in any fighting no matter what happens. Merilil left in secret and took an Athon-Mir apprentice with her. We don't know for sure which apprentice, but it's likely Talan, who wanted Nynaeve to take her to become Aes Sedai. Recall that Merilil is one of the 3 people who could have murdered Adeleas, though our current evidence actually points to Saratha, who skipped out on a lesson with the Athon-Mir at around the same time that Millie contacted her agent in the palace. It's not conclusive, though. To claim the throne, Elayne will need at least 10 of the 19 Strawn House's support. Aramilla currently has 6 openly supporting her. Elayne meets with the high seats of 4 houses, Mantir, Haven, Geard, and Northam. They turn out to be shockingly young and without any accompanying guardians or advisors, but they are at least firm in their support for Elayne. With Dylan's support in her own house, this brings her to 6, matching Aramilla. Of the remaining houses, 3 want Dylan on the throne, even though she supports Elayne and doesn't want it for herself. Aramilla has both Elenia and Nain as prisoners, which is a common tactic in Andor when trying to claim the throne. Nain seems to be focused entirely on escaping, but Elenia aims to seize the throne for herself. Nason is intelligent but insane and is being manipulated by Aramilla, who he believes to be his daughter. Nason wants Elenia for a wife despite her marriage to Jared. Aramilla uses Elenia to extort a pledge of support from Jared. To achieve the throne, Elenia plans to kill both Aramilla and Nason. That's a lot of names. That's probably the most complicated part of this book, is just keeping track of all that stuff. Moving on to Millie Skane and David Hamlin. Shiani, Millie, is in Caemlyn and has been orchestrating the arsons, among other things. Valon is still serving Shiani as part of her punishment. Marilyn Gamalfin is also under Shiani's command. Hamlin is followed while walking through the city. He kills the man, but doesn't know who sent him, suspecting either Brigida or Shiani. Hamlin is in a precarious position. Brigida could kill him as a rival or by finding out what he's doing, or Shiani could kill him just to tie up loose ends. Hamlin is shocked to learn that Shiani knows things about his past that seem impossible for anyone to know. To protect himself, Hamlin has formed a secret alliance with Valon. He's supposed to be raping her as part of her punishment, but the two are exchanging information instead. However, it seems that Shiani knows about the secret arrangement. In the end, Hamlin plans on killing Shiani, Gamalfin, and Valon, leaving no survivors from this group. Moving on to Perrin. Perrin keeps a leather cord on him and ties a new knot on it each day that he's apart from Faile. When we first jump to Perrin's perspective, he's at 22 knots. The camp is in low spirits and they're low on supplies. Rumors that Perrin has been sleeping with Elayne while Faile is gone have also soured Perrin's relations with the Two Rivers men. A very large group of Darkhounds, at least 50, scouts the camp and moves on. We learn that Darkhounds are made when a Darkhound eats a wolf's soul, and the wolves fear them in a way that Perrin has never felt a wolf fear anything else. When he asks the wolves about them, all they say is that the last hunt, Tarmangadan, is coming. Masudi studied Darkhounds and knows that there are at least 8 packs of Darkhounds in total, as this pack isn't one of the 7 that she's already encountered. This pack is in a hurry and has probably been on the hunt for a while. They'll remain focused on the target of their hunt, only killing others if it doesn't interfere with the hunt, until they complete it. Perrin asks a very ominous question. Can they eat a man's soul, Elias? Say, a man who can talk to wolves? Masema and his forces continue to stay near Perrin's. People occasionally go missing, clearly taken by Masema, but there's little Perrin can do about it. Masema's forces are ill-equipped and disorganized, but they outnumber Perrin's forces, and even if he did defeat them, the survivors would simply split off and become roving bands of bandits, which wouldn't really be much better than where they're at now. Balwer thinks that Masema has been meeting with the White Cloaks, and Perrin thinks that Masema has been meeting with the Shan-Shan. Maybe they're both right. Masema had a letter from Suroth, granting the bearer of the letter her protection and aid. Anora and Masudi have been meeting with Masema in secret. Elayne finally stopped sexually harassing Perrin and now seems to be sincerely helping him keep himself together and rescue Faile. Perrin seems to take this at face value, but it seems more likely to me that she's just pausing her contest with Faile out of a sense of pride and sportsmanship. Perrin gets a map of Malden, where the Shaido are gathered, and he has a rough estimate of their numbers, enough to know that he's overwhelmingly outnumbered. With 32 knots on his cord, Perrin's camp has nearly run out of food, and they've resorted to eating ground-up acorns found from squirrel caches. To secure new supplies, a small group heads to Sohabor. Upon arriving, they discover that the spirits of the dead are rising as ghosts in Sohabor, and the inhabitants have all stopped washing themselves or seemingly caring about anything at all in life. The warehouses have all spoiled, with the food bags roughly half full of weevils, and even the oil smells rancid. They winnow the larger grains and beans, finding enough food for a little while longer. The Aes Sedai want to leave someone behind to investigate, but Perrin can't spare any Aes Sedai while trying to rescue Faile. Perrin orders for Shaido prisoners to be found. When he returns from Sohabor, 5 men have been taken prisoner and 1 is being tortured. Perrin initially stops the torture, but then takes over, chopping a prisoner's hand off with his axe and commanding that they will be split up and questioned, with a failure to answer truthfully being met with a limb being hacked off from each of them. Even if all their hands and feet are cut off, he'll have them healed and left in a town to beg. Even Masema is stunned by this, and the Shaido give in. However, they don't actually know anything useful. Horrified and disgusted with himself, Perrin finally throws his axe away. He never came to like holding it, but he still can't hold it anymore. Balwer finds Talmvor and Sohabor. Talmvor knows of a group of about 15,000 Shanshan, mostly Taraboners, and a dozen Damane who might be willing to work with Perrin to defeat the Shaido. Perrin is willing to consider this. Moving on to Faile. Faile is still enslaved. She estimates that there are more than 70,000 Shaido and nearly as many Gaishan, as well as more than 400 Wise Ones in the camp. She wants to escape before Perrin finds the camp, as she's worried that he'll attack even though the odds are overwhelmingly against him. Bane and Chiad will help Faile and the other Wetlanders escape, but they will remain a year and a day as they are subject to Jieto. Orella and Lasil manage to escape briefly but are caught and punished. An Aiel man tries to rape Faile, citing Savannah's abandonment of Aiel custom as justification. Roland, the Meriden who caught Faile, rescues her. He flirts with her in the Aiel way, trying to make her laugh and asking if she wants to talk sometime. Faile remains faithful to Perrin, but Aleander suggests doing whatever she has to do to get back to Perrin, and he should understand. Galena found Faile's hidden dagger and has Faile punished on suspicion of planning to escape. Now it will be almost impossible for her to do so. As punishment, she's tortured by being bound in a painful position and left outside overnight in the cold. Roland keeps her company, providing heat, support for her body, and massage to alleviate the pain. Faile laughs, accepting that she has probably found a way to escape. Moving on to Mat. Mat, the remaining Red Arms, Oliver, Tom, Julin, Noel, the Three Aes Sedai, the Three Soldam, Egwene, Dolmen, Setael, Seleucia, and Tuon are all hiding in Luga's show to escape the Shanshan, or as prisoners. They're traveling to Lugar, but the show moves very slowly. They might not arrive until summer. The Athan-Mir who escaped due to Mat managed to steal some great ships and leave, but the way out was very bloody and destroyed a great number of ships. Mat notes that the Shanshan lacked the ships to return across the Aerith Ocean, and he feels guilty for the deaths caused by his actions. Egwene and Mat butt heads over who's in charge, but Mat's the one with the gold. Along the way, Mat courts Tuon. She continues to call him Toy, and doesn't immediately respond to his courting, but is clearly courting him back. Mat learns that, despite being small, Tuon is 19 years old. Tuon, strangely, asks Mat if he remembers Hawkwing's face. He actually does from his memories, but he does not admit it. Tylin was killed, likely by the Golem, while still tied up after Mat left her. Mat feels guilt for this as though he killed her himself. Mat learns that the Shanshan wedding ceremony involves both parties stating, "She is my wife, he is my husband," 3 times in front of witnesses. For the blood, this doesn't actually need to be done simultaneously, just within a year and a day of each other. Given that Mat's response to learning that Tuon was the daughter of the 9 Moons was to say she is my wife 3 times, she can choose to marry him at any time by simply stating that he's her husband 3 times. The Shanshan prisoners make no attempts to escape or seek rescue, despite ample opportunity. In light of this, Mat goes shopping for cloth with Tuon and Seleucia. While they're out shopping, Renna, the Soldam who trained Egwene, stabs Egwene and flees. Egwene reveals why Renna would want to stab her, because Egwene knows the secret that Soldam are capable of channeling. Note that Tuon likes to train Damane personally, meaning that she must also be capable of at least some channeling, but we haven't really had time to explore this yet. Egwene is healed, but they all know that the Shanshan will come for them quickly if Renna is allowed to betray them. Mat takes a few men with him to chase, and tells the others to flee and wait for his return. They catch up to Renna just as she's about to crest the last tail before Koromem, which would mean her escape. Mat orders Harnan to shoot her. Like Rand, Mat keeps a tally of the women who have died because of him. He counts 3 names he knows, and also spent some time earlier in the book trying to do the math on the number of people killed when the Athan-Mir left Avodar. Back at Luca's show, Mat finds that nobody actually fled, and Tuon presented Luca with an official document for her protection. Mat realizes, beyond any doubt, that Tuon is just biding her time to wed him, and that he is truly caught. She is in control here. Moving on to Egwene. Egwene and Brynn have begun the siege of Tar Valon, but it's still in the early stages. They weren't able to block the harbor with boats as Brynn initially planned, so the White Tower is still able to gain supplies and reinforcements. Egwene is unwilling, at least for now, to use traveling to send an army into the city, as this would risk dramatically reducing the Aes Sedai's strength shortly before Tarmangada. And it would be very, very bloody, and that's something Egwene would like to avoid if possible. Egwene continues to live as though she's already bound by the 3 oaths. She's not even willing to sink 1 ship in the harbor, as men would definitely die in the freezing waters getting away, and that would break the 3 oaths. From Egwene's wording, it's clear that she considers the Ashaman to be enemies, grouping them together in her mind with dark friends. The rebel Aes Sedai believe that Rand has used compulsion on the Aes Sedai following him, and Egwene suspects this as well. She doesn't have much, if any, trust left for Rand. The great iron chains that are used to defend the harbor are described in great detail. We also learn that Egwene has rediscovered the method to create Quendair, a weave of fire, earth, and air that transforms iron into white Quendair. Egwene has a workshop set up to train others to do this, with the excuse that they'll sell what they create to fund the war. Egwene is capable of transforming iron into Quendair instantly, but most Aes Sedai struggle to do it at all, or do so very slowly. We also see, in another very detailed scene, that the process is capable of fusing iron and Quendair together in a mess. From the text, it's frankly kind of obvious that Egwene plans to transform the great chains around the harbor to block off the harbor around Tar Valon. From the text, it's honestly kind of obvious that Egwene plans to transform the chains used to defend Tar Valon into Quendair in order to block off the harbor and cut off supplies, but only Egwene, Swan, and the Hall know that this is her plan. Halima, Erengar, continues to go undetected. It seems likely that Halima is causing Egwene's headaches, as they're the only one that can cure them. Halima has also been murdering people in the camp using Side-In to avoid suspicion. In particular, Halima kills the few scarce people who can actually create Quendair, leaving only Bolwyn and Egwene. Politics among the Aes Sedai continue to develop an intrigue. Ramonda and Elayne continue to vie for power and oppose Egwene, but Egwene's status as Amyrlin's seat seems to be more solid than it was before. Each Aja has an advisor set to influence and spy on Egwene, but Egwene successfully manipulated the choosing so that her advisors are those that swore oaths to her, at least until Anaya is murdered and replaced. Delena, who Halima supposedly serves, proposes negotiations with Elaida. Egwene grants permission, but won't budge on a requirement that Elaida go into exile, a requirement that she knows will make negotiations all but impossible. The debate over negotiations causes more discord among the Aes Sedai. Egwene tries to bring Ramonda into her plan to tie the kin to the Aes Sedai by allowing Aes Sedai to retire into the kin, freeing themselves of the three oaths and regaining longer lifespans. Ramonda is horrified by the idea. The camp's food stores are spoiling, filled with an infestation of weevils and a quick spoiling of the meat. The supplies were wrapped in keeping, and the weather is very cold, which should have prevented anything from spoiling, so this is very strange. Either there's a saboteur, Sadar is failing, or we're seeing Shaitan reach out apocalyptically to further the famine it began when it altered the weather. The enormous number of new novices, brought in by Egwene lifting the age restriction, is taxing the Aes Sedai's ability to keep them organized. Fortunately, Sharina Malloy, the old novice with the potential at least as high Nynaeve's, organized them into families of cousins. Nicola and Arena go missing. Nicola was so obnoxious, constantly making up foretellings, that her family actually covered for her just to make sure that she would actually get away. It seems likely that Nicola has learned traveling, and she has a fairly high potential, so this could become significant. Swan, via Lyanna's eyes and ears in the White Tower, notes that the new sitters are all uncommonly young for both the Tower and the Rebels. She can't figure out why this is happening, but there's definitely something going on. She also notes that it's unlikely that the new sitters and the Aja heads are all Black Aja, as that would mean that the Black Aja is essentially already taken over. In response to the surge of Saidar caused by Rand and Nynaeve's usage of the Chodan Call, Moira brings forward a proposal to send groups to form an agreement with the Ashaman so they can link with them and create larger circles. The proposal meets the lesser consensus, but they're very firm that this is not an alliance, and the bonds they form must put the men at a severe disadvantage. Egwene asserts that compulsion will not be allowed. Note, by the way, that Egwene remembers the weave for compulsion from Moghedien, but she's firmly committed to never using it or allowing others to do so if she can stop them. Egwene has a true dream of Mat, bowling over pins that represent thousands of men each, and an Illuminator is somehow part of it. I really think that Mat and Aludra are going to create and use cannons. Egwene also has a true dream in which a Shan-Shan will offer to save her, and then the White Tower will be attacked by the Shan-Shan. Just as Bolwyn is heading out to fulfill Egwene's plan to turn the chains in Tar Valon's harbor into Quendair, Egwene decides that it isn't right for the Amyrlin seat to make a novice do this when she can do it better herself. Egwene takes Bolwyn's place and successfully turns the chain to Quendair in an instant. She is then captured, betrayed by someone who knew her plan, and fed Forkroot. And that's the last we see of her. Alright, so here we are. Some 5,000 words in and however many minutes, and just past the summary. I really honestly did try to shorten it as much as I could, but Crossroads of Twilight is just an immensely complicated book. I am mostly saying this in praise. The world of the Wheel of Time is a rich and complex one, and Robert Jordan clearly had a zealous passion for keeping track of all the threads in his pattern. I would much rather read something just a little bit complicated than just drop plot lines whenever they become inconvenient. That said, I am really not sure how someone reading this more casually, just kind of blowing through it, could have possibly kept track of all the characters in here. I had to reference my notes constantly to remember what was going on and who everybody was. Our theme this time around is testing principles. Do you want to do it the easy way or the right way? In Crossroads of Twilight, we get two things, sieges and hard choices. Whether we're trying to unify the White Tower while following the Three Oaths, keeping Caemlyn without foreign aid, question an Aiel, or silence a traitor, we see our characters subject to immense pressure to break with their principles. This pressure forces our characters to demonstrate how they've changed since they first set out. Egwene in particular really stands out here. We can plainly see how much she's grown from the entitled girl who wanted all the power without any of the responsibility into one of the most responsible characters we have. For the series as a work of literature, we continue the slog's slow march to Tarmangaiden. It's kind of crazy to look back to the first few books and see just how much has changed for both the world and our characters. Watching the world progress with us as we're reading it to the state it's in now makes it feel more familiar to us as readers. This familiarity makes us care more about the world, and it provides a baseline to heighten the sense of otherness we feel for Shaitan. When we first started the series, everything was new and mysterious. Remember the aura of mystery that used to surround the Aes Sedai? Now that most of the world feels like home, the few dark corners we haven't really seen yet are all the more disturbing for it. On a more practical level, we also get to see how sieges work. I think this serves to teach us a little bit about how war works in this world so that we'll have the context to follow Tarmangaiden later on without getting bogged down in all these details that we're learning now. The sieges also loop back into our theme directly, as a siege is essentially a test of which side is better prepared for an assault, which is a combination of resolve, cunning, reality, and principles. So let's dig into some details. In Crossroads of Twilight, we get 3 sieges. Egwene's siege of Tar Valon, the siege against Elayne and Caemlyn, and Perrin's sort of siege against the Shaido and Malden. What comes to mind when you think of a siege? I think we fans of fantasy could be forgiven for thinking of scenes like the Battle of Helm's Deep from Peter Jackson's The Two Towers, but that really wasn't much of a siege. It was a fantastic battle at a fortification, but the word siege refers to sitting. The specifics vary based on the technology and customs of the time and place, but basically an attacker wants to get into a fortification and they either can't or don't want to risk a direct assault. So they blockade the place, cutting off supplies and reinforcements, which is technically referred to as investment. That note on technology and custom there just a second ago is actually pretty important. Assaulting settlements looks very different depending on when and where you look. And I'm not just talking about pre-modern versus modern. Once again, I'll add a comment somewhere below the video. There's some fantastic articles from Davro if you want a really deep dive, but let me see if I can just give a really high-level summary for us here. So, first off, consider why you would fortify a location. Walls, castles, and guards are expensive and require upkeep. Castles, in particular, aren't all that comfortable either. If you live in a nice neighborhood, do you want to put bars on your window? Do you pay for a monthly security service if you're not worried about getting robbed? If you do pay for a security service, are you at all worried that the people protecting you might be the ones to rob you, either of your things or your privacy? If you have a Ring, you might want to just do a web search for Ring and police. My point is, there are costs to securing something, and no sane person would attempt to make themselves absolutely perfectly secure all the time. Even if that were possible, and it's not, it would be ridiculously expensive and uncomfortable. No, we need to make a reasonable decision about how much security we want for our circumstances. And that level of security will differ based on your neighbors. How likely are they to attack you? What sort of attack can they muster? What sort of rules are they likely to follow? Is it safe to leave your front door unlocked? How about your back door? What about your windows? Do you expect a thief to be scared off by your dog, or are you actually worried to protect your dog from a potential thief? Are you worried about your coworkers knowing how much money is in your wallet? How about a stranger? Does it matter whether it's day or night, or whether it's crowded? Would you feel safer if someone walked you to your car after work? Does it matter how big that person is, or what their gender is, or is it just enough not to be alone? These decisions might feel purely practical, but there's actually a lot of culture and nuance for the situation wrapped up in this. Let's not forget about the practical concerns going on for us here either. In my coverage of the Path of Daggers, I talked a fair bit about feeding armies. Recall that one of the trickiest things to do with an army is to remain still, as you quickly run out of local people to forage. If you control a river near to your camp, then you might be able to resupply through there, but you better make sure that you don't lose control of the river. Without a river, or trains in a more modern context, you'll have to consider wagons, but as we discussed before, wagons don't actually scale very well, as the people and animals transporting the goods also need to eat. Traveling changes this, but if you're relying purely on traveling, then the people opening the gateways become a bottleneck, and you'd better protect and keep them with you. Disease is always a concern when dealing with a large number of people as well, and again, this is exacerbated by having a large group of people that are staying still. An army passing through a region can really ruin the place for the locals, but so long as they keep moving, there's not too much risk of polluting the army's water source, as they're not really using the same one for very long. In a siege, this becomes far more tricky. Disease can be just as deadly as weapons, if not actually far more so. I really liked the attention to detail in our sieges here. Perrin's army is driven to eating acorns dug from squirrel caches, which presses him into buying the spoiled and haunted food from Sohabor. They have it winnowed, but this isn't a perfect solution. They're going to bring a lot of weevils back with them to the camp. Note that even the oil had gone bad. Perrin's facing a real time limit on getting Faile back before his army starves to the point where he either needs to order retreat or he's going to lose control. Elayne and Egwene are a little bit better off here, but we also see Elayne forced to cede land to the Athan Mir just to keep the gateway open. Bear in mind that giving away land to foreigners isn't a good look for Elayne right now, when she's specifically fighting the narrative that she's a puppet of foreign powers. Egwene is probably the best off of these three, but even she's worried about continuing to fund the war. Selling the Quendera practice items was cover for a plan to block the harbor, but it could actually bring in some real revenue. Yet, how does this make the rebels look? Selling trinkets hurts the image of the Aes Sedai and makes the rebels look a lot less like the real Aes Sedai in the tower. In each of these cases, morale and desertion is a real concern as well. The people inside Caemlyn are kind of trapped inside, but Egwene and Perrin's forces could just walk away if things became too uncomfortable. Even in Caemlyn, anyone sick of the siege might start considering sabotage to end it quickly, and maybe come out of it with some personal profit as well. But let's get back to the principles and social aspect of sieges. For Egwene's siege of Tar Valon, consider this quote from when she sees ships of reinforcements approaching Tar Valon. Quote from chapter 16, the subject of negotiations. She thought about weaving a flare, a starburst of light, perhaps with a loud bang, just above each of the vessels. That would certainly let anyone aboard with brains realize that neither speed nor distance kept them safe here, only a forbearance born of the three oaths. They should know that they were safe because of Aes Sedai. Note that Egwene isn't worried about Elaida's retaliation here. In terms of the one power, Egwene's rebels vastly overpower Elaida's. Including the novices, Egwene's numbers are also far greater. But it's not just about quantity. Many of the novices, as well as Egwene herself, dwarf the older Aes Sedai in power. They've also discovered many new weaves. Bear in mind, too, that the White Tower is a tower. How easy would it be for Egwene to travel in with a bunch of soldiers in a couple full circles and just burn the tower down from the bottom up? They wouldn't have to do a lot of fighting, just start the fire and then travel back out. It's short enough distance, they probably won't need to sit there for a long time to remake the portal. Egwene's also one of only a few women with any real talent for manipulating Earth, and her distance is pretty long. Could she just use a spyglass and just knock the tower over? But Egwene won't even sink a ship, as that would be a violation of the three oaths. She's trying to heal the Aes Sedai, not conquer or destroy them. Yet, it's not as though the conflict between the two factions of Aes Sedai is somehow ethical or honest either. These are cultural rules, and they're pretty arbitrary. Sinking a ship is wrong, but using newly discovered weaves to change iron into Quendera as part of the investment against Tar Valon is perfectly fair. There's a decent chance that people will die because of this, too. Elaida might surrender before she starves, or maybe any of the Aes Sedai starve, but what about the poorest person in Tar Valon? The Aes Sedai on both sides would agree that sinking a ship is a violation of the three oaths, but there's more ambiguity around, for example, opening a gateway to allow soldiers to flood the city. This seems more like something that Egwene is avoiding based on her strategy to rebuild the Aes Sedai, not adherence to custom or even just personal morals. Note, by the way, that these rules aren't even really static. What someone is unwilling to do today might not be the same tomorrow. Egwene really, really does not like being chained. So moving on to Elayne. Similar to Egwene, Elayne's options in Caemlyn are restricted, as are those of her attackers. Elayne notes explicitly that she can't just channel destroy the enemy armies. I mean, she could, but it would turn Andor against her immediately. Even if she managed to retain her authority by sheer terror, that's not the sort of queen that she intends to become. Elayne won't even use Rand's forces camped nearby. Bail and Bashir both want to intervene, if only out of anger at how thoroughly and sloppily the Andoran armies ignore them. I actually have to wonder whether the armies turning a blind spot to Bail and Bashir is intentional bait. Even a single raid from the Aiel could be used as propaganda to paint Elayne as a puppet of Rand, subject to foreign influence. In fact, none of the High Seats want the conflict to erupt into violence. They all know that it could, but their collective goal is to challenge each other in a way that proves who would win, then say that's good enough. This does not, however, mean that they're all playing fair. Kidnapping and even the threat of rape is considered perfectly fair, as we see with Aramilla's treatment of Nain and Elenia. Assassination is fine too. Again, this isn't about ethics in some absolute sense, it's about cultural rules of conflict. The people don't mind that the Queen of Andor employs kidnappers and assassins, but she certainly can't be a puppet. And nobody's quite sure yet what it means for the Queen to be Aes Sedai, but starting off by personally attacking people with the one power probably isn't a good way to start. So, calling Perrin's camp a siege of Malden isn't strictly correct, as the Shaido don't even know that he's there, but it's pretty similar. And similar to Egwene and Elayne, Perrin's contending with some tricky cultural rules here. Not only is he dealing with Aiel custom, but he's also dealing with the shifting rules of the Shaido in particular. We see this most clearly from Faile's perspective when she approaches Chiad about escaping. Quote from chapter 9, Traps. I will help you as far as I can because it is not right for the Shaido to hold you. You do not follow Jieto. I do. If I cast aside my honor and my obligations just because the Shaido have, then I allow them to decide how I will act. I will wear white for a year and a day, and then they will release me or I will walk away, but I will not throw away who I am. We'll talk more about Perrin's use of torture later on, but consider the Shaido are foreign invaders with no reservation against taking slaves. As we see with Faile, even the common Shaido are starting to consider, for example, whether it's acceptable to rape their Gaishan. When one side throws custom away, it creates an easy justification for the other side to throw away their principles as well. If the Shaido were playing by the rules, would Perrin have ever considered working with Masema or the Shanshan? Would he have considered torture? Even if Faile were taken prisoner, how different might Perrin's reaction have been if he was confident that she was safe, or if he could pay a ransom to get her back? The reality is that societies don't really follow any sort of strict rules of war. To the extent that forces are restricted by society, it's an ephemeral thing, specific to that conflict in that moment and those strategic goals that the sides have. That doesn't mean that forces are entirely unscrupulous, just that their principles are formed by their strategic goals. Egwene wants to unify and heal the Aes Sedai, so she isn't willing to win a battle at the cost of a strong and unified White Tower. Elayne wants the throne. There's no point in defeating Arimilla if she loses any sense of legitimacy as the Queen of Andor. Perrin just wants his wife back, but would she still love him if he resorted to despicable acts to free her? Likewise, Faile wants to get back to Perrin. Is it worth sleeping with Roland to do so? Would that ruin their marriage? That seems like a pretty good segue into moving on from sieges to focus more on our characters. So, Perrin's dilemma in chapter 27, What Must Be Done, was just absolutely heart-wrenching. The whole chapter was absolutely incredible, but there's one part in particular I thought was really, really well done. Just before Perrin hacks off the Aiel man's hand, we get the stream of consciousness paragraph. What had to be done? Perrin looked at the faces around him. Arganda, scowling with hatred, at him as much as the Shaido now. Masema, stinking of madness and filled with a scornful hate. You must be willing and able to hurt a stone. Idara, her face as unreadable as the Aes Sedai's, arms folded calmly beneath her breasts. Even Shaido know how to embrace pain. It will take days. Sulin, the scar across her cheek still pale on her leathery skin, her gaze level and her scent implacable. They will yield slowly and as little as possible. Elayne, smelling of judgment, a ruler who had sent its men to death and never lost a night's sleep. What had to be done, willing and able to hurt a stone, embrace pain. O light, Faile. The axe was as light as a feather, rising in his hand, and came down like a hammer on the anvil, the heavy blade shearing through the Shaido's left wrist. Then Perrin gives his ultimatum. 2 hands and 2 feet. That means you get 4 chances to answer the same. And if you all hold out, I still won't kill you. I'll find a village to leave you in, some place that will let you beg, somewhere the boys will toss a coin to the fierce Aielmen with no hands or feet. You think on it and decide whether it's worth keeping my wife from me. Throughout this section, Perrin also notes the feel of the axe in his hand. Over the course of just a couple of pages, he goes from thinking that he could not have lifted the axe again if he had to for his life, to being surprised to find that he could lift the axe at all. Now, we've been waiting on Perrin to get rid of his axe since way back in the Eye of the World. Recall, Perrin and Egwene were running away from ravens, and they knew that they were about to be devoured terribly. They saw a fox torn apart, and Perrin decided that a clean death from his axe would be preferable for Egwene. He was nearly ready to do it when they crossed into a steading. He never told Egwene, but Elias knew. That conversation with Elias is a near mirror for the one that we get in Crossroads of Twilight. I really like the kind of adversarial style of Elias's advice, by the way. In the Eye of the World, he goads Perrin, asking him if he hates Egwene so much for dragging her feet and holding him back with her womanish ways that he wanted to kill her. Then, when Perrin, of course, starts protesting, he quickly jumps ahead, cutting short Perrin's self-loathing. That's when he gives Perrin the advice he keeps thinking back on. You'll use it, boy, and as long as you hate using it, you will use it more wisely than most men would. Wait. If ever you don't hate it any longer, then will be the time to throw it as far as you can and run the other way. In Crossroads of Twilight, again, Elias starts off his advice with a bit of goading. Did you start liking it back there? I'm too frightened to spit in a battle, but I feel more alive than any time except when I'm holding Faile. I don't think I could stand it if I came to feel that way about what I just did back there. I don't think Faile would have me back if it came to that. I really like the nuance here. Perrin isn't worried about becoming cruel. Too often in fiction, the arc here would be for Perrin to come to enjoy the cruelty itself. He becomes so unambiguously vile that he becomes unrecognizable to readers. I could easily imagine an alternate version of this chapter where Perrin leans into cruelty and anger with the justification that it's for Faile's sake. But that's not what Perrin's anxious over, and Elias knows it. What Perrin's feeling is just the physical thrill of violence. That he's anxious and ashamed of it is a mark of his gentle character. And that he's kind of just an anxious and self-critical person. I actually think there's a really good parallel here with Faile's conundrum in using Roland to escape the Shido. She is fiercely loyal to Perrin, but Roland likes her, and he might be willing to help her. Note Alejandre's advice here. If he helped me escape, I would marry him. Or not, as he wanted. He's not quite pretty, but it wouldn't be painful, and my husband, if I had one, would never have to know. If he had any sense, he would be overjoyed to have me back and ask no questions he didn't want answers to. It's clear from Faile's reaction that she would consider getting involved with Roland to be a violation of her marriage to Perrin, even under the circumstances. Perhaps Roland is satisfied with what happens while your Gaishan cannot be held against you when you put off the white, but Faile clearly does not see it that way. Yet, Roland is also her only real option. I'm not sure that Roland would knowingly help her escape, but he might, for example, bring her out somewhere that she can more easily escape from. When Roland comforts and massages her while she's being tortured, she notes that it feels good. Similar to Perrin, this doesn't mean that she likes it. Perrin chopped off a man's hand because he thought it would help him find Faile. The physical thrill from this was out of his control. Likewise, Faile doing what she has to do to escape might come with some feelings of comfort or pleasure, but that doesn't mean that she's doing it for those reasons. In the end, Perrin throws away his axe not because he's come to like it, but out of despair that it didn't even matter. Leave it for whoever finds it. Maybe some fool gleeman will make a story out of it. But the axe isn't really the point. Perrin's a leader now. He can leave his axe behind, but he'll consider making a deal with the Shan-Shan to save Faile. That doesn't mean he has to like it. So, we already talked a little bit about Egwene earlier when discussing the Siege of Tar Valon, but I want to dig a little bit deeper here. Egwene's growth is just absolutely inspiring. When I first started talking about how selfish, entitled, and reckless Egwene was, I got a lot of criticism for it. Always from people that have already finished the series. Even at the time, I kept having to explain that I wasn't saying that Egwene couldn't become an admirable person, just that she wasn't one yet, and that being a bad person at the start of an arc doesn't make someone a bad character. To the contrary, a good character almost necessarily starts off with some flaws and then grows past them. More recently, I've pointed out that Egwene didn't really grow into becoming a good Caemlyn. She was just lucky that her particular flaws happened to be perfect for the situation she found herself in. Only someone with an unearned sense of entitlement could have so adroitly stepped into the puppet Caemlyn position and twisted it to her benefit. Now, finally, I think I can say that Egwene has matured into a truly admirable person. She's no longer concerned with seizing power for herself, but with doing what's best for the Aes Sedai. That she's in charge seems almost incidental to her goals now. She's only in charge because, frankly, nobody else could be. This new growth really started when she first came to realize that the three oaths are what make someone Aes Sedai, not the mere ability to channel. In that realization, she discovered that limitations aren't always bad. They can be as important as freedom sometimes. Egwene isn't even bound by the three oaths, yet she chooses to live by them. And then we get chapter 30, what the Oath Rod can do. Bowman is about to cross the river to change the Iron Chain into Quendare. It's risky, but Bode can do it. Here, Egwene is reliving when Siuan first charged our characters with rooting out the Black Aja, but from the other perspective. Bode is in almost the exact same position that Egwene was in back then. It's dangerous, she's definitely scared, but she knows that she can do it. She's probably proud of being trusted with such an important task. Egwene, as Amyrlin, knows rationally that she really should let Bode do it. She can't do it herself. It's just too risky. If Bode is caught or killed, it would be a loss, but a fairly minor one next to losing the rebel Amyrlin seat. Yet, Egwene has come to understand that what was done to her really wasn't right. At the time, she kinda didn't mind it. She was hungry for more power and she liked being able to go faster. But she was being forced. She was lucky to survive and it could have ended very differently. Quote from chapter 30, what the Oath Rod can do. I know you can, but not as well as I can. Not yet. That seemed too much like a criticism that the other woman had not earned. I am the Amyrlin seat, Bode. Some decisions only I can make, and some things I shouldn't ask a novice to do when I can do them better. Perhaps that was not a great deal milder, but she could not explain about Laren and Nicola, or the price the White Tower demanded of all its daughters. The Amyrlin could not explain the one to a novice, and a novice was not ready to learn about the other. Even in the night, the set of Bode's shoulders said she did not understand, but she had learned not to argue with Aes Sedai too, just as she had learned that Egwene was Aes Sedai. The rest she would learn eventually. The tower could take all the time it needed to teach her. In chapter 52 of The Lord of Chaos, when Egwene arranged for Loghain to escape, she asked Siuan if she was doing the right thing. Siuan's response, after kind of sputtering, was to say, do what you must and pay the price if you're wrong, sometimes if you are right too. A book later, in chapter 10 of A Crown of Swords, Egwene repeats the lesson to herself, do what you must, then pay the price for it. was what she had been taught by the same women who had marked off those forbidden areas. It was refusal to admit the debt, refusal to pay, that often turned necessity to evil. Now, Egwene thinks that this is a lesson that she was taught, but I actually disagree with her. For all of early Egwene's faults, I think that this particular virtue is something that she always knew, as an instinct. When I called Egwene reckless and entitled, I was referring to her hunger for knowledge and power without any real consideration of the cost. Yet, though young Egwene didn't spend enough time considering the cost, I think she was always willing to pay it when it came due. In Chapter 5 of The Fires of Heaven, Among the Wise Ones, Bear punishes Egwene and Aviendha by having them run around the camp 50 times naked. Here's the quote. "I know I don't understand WoT, Egwene began, and Aviendha laughed. You say you do not understand, Aes Sedai, yet you show that you live by it." Egwene regretted maintaining that lie with her. It had been hard work to get Aviendha to call her simply Egwene, and sometimes she slipped back, but it had to be kept with everyone if it was to hold with anyone. "You are Aes Sedai, and strong enough in the power to overcome Amis and Melaine together," Aviendha continued. "But you said that you would obey, so you scrub pots when they say scrub pots, and you run when they say run. You may not know WoT, but you follow it." It was not the same thing at all, of course. She gritted her teeth and did as she was told because that was the only way to learn dreamwalking, and she wanted to learn everything, more than anything else she could imagine. To even think she could live by this foolish WoT was simply silly. She did what she had to do, and only when and because she had to. They were coming back to where they had begun. As her foot hit the spot, Egwene said, "That's one," and ran on through the darkness with no one to see but Aviendha, no one to say whether she went back to her tent right then. Aviendha would not have told, but it never occurred to Egwene to stop short of the 50. That's just, by the way, that's one of my favorite quotes from the entire series so far, is that bit there, that she doesn't even think to stop early. I really, really like that scene. So, back to Crossroads of Twilight, Egwene stops Bode, taking her place. And consider what happens next. She's caught, yes, and that could be disastrous for the Aes Sedai, but she also succeeds in blocking the harbor. Note that Bode would have almost certainly been caught before she finished, as she's much slower. She would have been caught and the plan would have been ruined. Of course, that doesn't mean that it worked out for the best. If Egwene talks under torture, she could teach the White Tower some truly devastating weaves. I'm not even talking about just traveling. Egwene knows compulsion. She also knows nearly everything about the rebel camp and Bryn's army. She can also be ransomed or otherwise used as a bargaining chip. The Rebel Hall might not much mind having their Egwene problem taken care of, but with the exception of whoever betrayed her, I think the Hall has enough integrity and pride to care that their Amyrlin was taken. This is going to be a big problem in the next book. But as we already saw with Swan, sometimes you send others in your place and still wind up caught. So at least Egwene managed to keep her sense of honor intact. Whatever happens next, I don't think Elaida is even capable of taking that away from Egwene. So moving on to Mat. Mat's story in Crossroads of Twilight is pretty much just him courting Tuon. As I mentioned last time, this is itself actually a bit of good character growth for him. For most of the series, Mat's been fighting against his fate. Even now, he puts on a show of fighting against it, even to himself, but it's hard to really take it seriously when he's working so hard to win Tuon over. Of course, it also doesn't really matter either way what Mat thinks, as he learns when he returns from hunting down Rhenna to find that Tuon has the situation fully in hand, with the little cluster of silk rosebuds pinned to her shoulder. He was always caught. It doesn't matter if he fights or leans into it. Mat just really can't find any real agency for himself. All he can really choose is how he feels about it, and even that might not really be under his control. So, Tuon aside, Mat also has to kill a woman, Rhenna. Note the parallel between Mat and Rand, both in the scene with Rhenna and early in the book, when Mat is looking over the wreckage at Ebodar and trying to calculate how many died because of him. Both Mat and Rand carry a list of women they've killed with them. That Mat includes Tywin's name in this list is also really interesting and just sad. He really just doesn't have any mechanism for coming to terms with what Tywin did to him. He's probably never going to get any real resolution on this. I mean, she hurt him, he hated being with her, but he also liked her, and now he indirectly killed her. And it's not even like he can really talk about this with anyone, because no one really seems to understand it. They'll either think it's funny, or they'll just treat it as a lover died. I don't think anyone around him is going to pick up on the nuance of this. He's kind of just going to have to live with it. The moment with Rhenna was worded just absolutely beautifully, though it was about as crushing as the scene with Perrin. Quote, "Mat felt something flicker and die inside him. He did not know what. Something. The dice rolled like thunder. Shoot," he said. He wanted to close his eyes. The crossbow snapped. The bolt made a black streak through the air. Rhenna slammed forward when it hit her back. She had almost managed to push herself erect against the bay's neck when Harnon's arrow took her. Slowly, she toppled from the horse, sliding down the slope, rolling, bouncing off saplings, tumbling faster and faster until she splashed into the stream. For a moment, she floated face down against the bank, and then the current caught her and pulled her away, skirts billowing up on the water. Slowly, she drifted towards the Eldar. Maybe, eventually, she would reach the sea. And that made 3. It hardly seemed to matter that the dice had stopped. That made 3. Never again, he thought as Renna floated out of sight and around a bend. If I die for it, never again. Yet, we do have a small bit of relief for Mat here. Tuon's response to this is to forbid Mat from mourning a traitor. A traitor twice over, once against the Empire and again against Mat. What you did was justice, and I name it so. Her tone said that if she named a thing, then it was well and truly named. This is actually kind of sweet, I think. Like, I don't think she actually succeeded in getting that name off Mat's list, but Mat himself didn't actually fire the bolt or the arrow. He just ordered it. So if Tuon takes responsibility for the order, then in a sense, it's as though his personal responsibility is gone. I mean, I'm not really sure how I feel about calling the Nuremberg defense sweet, but for Tuon, I think it actually kind of counts. Alright, so those are kind of the most significant character trials in the book, but I do want to just briefly touch on a couple of other minor ones. I already mentioned Elayne's difficulty in the siege at Caemlyn, but thus far, I don't really think that this has tested her as a character. It's demonstrated how amazing Elayne's education and instincts as a politician and queen are, which was very cool, but so far things have mostly gone according to script for contested succession in Andor. I do worry that her plan to let everyone think that Mellor is the father of her children might be kind of a bad idea. I mean, I get that she wants to protect them from being targeted as Rand's children, but, I mean, even without knowing that he's a dark friend, everyone seems to know he's a bit of a creep, and, like, that has to reflect poorly on her, or at the very least just see, I don't know why she didn't pick somebody else or just leave it up to debate. I mean, maybe she's more clever than I am about this, but it just, I don't know, he seems like a creep. And then, of course, she doesn't know it, but given that he actually does plan to betray and rape her, the fact that now everyone will just believe it's a tryst for a little while, I mean, everyone but, like, Brigida and Aviendha, it's making things worse for herself. But, again, she doesn't know he's a dark friend, so it's kind of fair. I don't think that's really dumb. I think just maybe she could have picked a less creepy guy. Now, Aviendha doesn't really get a lot of time to do anything in this book, but we do get to briefly see that she's continuing to struggle with bridging the gap between the Aiel and Rand's people. She seems to be growing more accustomed to fancy dress, but the moment she starts to feel a little tiny bit comfortable in it, she's told that now she's growing too comfortable and needs to spend more time with the Aiel. Side note, she is not the only character who's started to grow comfortable in fancy clothes that doesn't want anyone to know that they are and never would have believed it at the beginning of the series. Now, and even Mat in particular have developed a serious taste for expensive clothing. I'm not sure how much Rand actually likes fancy clothes, but he's also come to see them as proper for himself and no longer makes any effort to avoid them. In Min's case, I think she's starting to like girlier clothes more just because of the effect they have on Rand, but still. I think the only character who's really completely retained their disliking for fancy clothes is Perrin. And if he ever gets Faile back, he'll probably just let her dress him for the rest of his life. We also didn't get to see a whole lot of Rand this book. I mean, thankfully, he didn't just sleep through the whole damn book like I was worried, but we did only get, I think it was 2 chapters. But in that little bit, we get to see him finally turn his attention just a little tiny bit towards the Black Tower. I guess late is better than never. I did find it interesting that he was upset with Logain for bonding the Aes Sedai. This is actually a notable change for Rand from a few books ago. When he first broke free from the box, he was pretty ready to subjugate the Aes Sedai. It seems that his dealing with Cadsuane has successfully softened him here, at least to the point where he begrudgingly accepts that he does need the Aes Sedai, and he needs them to still be Aes Sedai. There's actually a really good parallel with Egwene here. I've mentioned it before, but I'll say it again. Egwene and Rand are very, very similar people. Rand doesn't trust the Aes Sedai, and Egwene doesn't trust the Ashaman, but they're both horrified at the thought of compelling them. I'm actually really curious if Rand's going to learn that Egwene was taken by Elaida. Rand and Egwene haven't really talked in a very long time now. It's been in the order of years, I think, hasn't it? A very long time. And we know that Egwene doesn't have much trust left for Rand, given the rumors that she's heard, but they still care for each other. I could imagine Rand stepping in to help Egwene if he learns what's happening, though this would probably be terrible for Egwene politically. Galen will want to help too. I mean, maybe he'll finally grow a spine. So everything that happened in So Habor was just fascinating. In-universe, this seems like a continuation of what Shaitan started when he touched the weather. With the seasons returned to normal, he's moved on to fostering weevils. In case the bit in So Habor wasn't sufficient, note that Egwene's stores are also spoiling, and that's despite the keeping they wove around each barrel. This is definitely a supernatural occurrence. Even the oil is spoiled in Sohaber. And it's not hard to see the inspiration for this. I haven't actually talked about the Apocalypse of Jon yet in this series, have I? I probably should have. I mean, it's at least as relevant to what's going on in the Wheel of Time as the Caerleon cycle. I'm specifically talking about Chapter 6. You know, when the 7 seals are opened, the world is beset by conquest, war, famine, and death, and those slain for the word of God are given white robes and told to rest for a season. As much fun as I'd have reading it all out here, you've heard it before, probably, so I'll restrain myself. The point is, the first horseman has a bow and a crown and brings conquest. The second is a sword and takes peace from the world. The third holds a scale and declares, a measure of wheat for a penny and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. Well, it's a penny in the King James Version. The point is that it's relatively expensive for common people. The fourth is death, carrying hell with him, and he ravages the earth with sword, hunger, pestilence, and wild beasts. There are both deep and superficial similarities here. The white robes and season of rest, for example, seems like just superficial similarity with the surge of new Gaishan and novices. Conquest, on the other hand, is more deeply rooted in the Shan-Shan's return and in Rand's attempt to unify the countries. War is, of course, a natural result of conquest, but I think we can actually give a little extra credit to Masema here, as he brings war indiscriminately. But it's our third horseman that's got me talking about this today, as the scene in Sohaber feels like a very specific reference. Shaitan first began famine when he touched the weather, but now we're seeing a plague of weevils and spoilage. Notably, whereas the third horseman spares the oil and wine, Shaitan doesn't even do that. Though I'm reasonably certain the point of sparing oil and wine is either about leaving ritual goods or luxury goods untouched, while the oil we're looking for in Sohaber is for lanterns, which is a little bit more common and isn't being used for ritual purposes. Anyway, I might do a deeper exegesis into the influence of the Book of Revelation on the Wheel of Time when I'm done with the series, but honestly, I'm pretty sure this is already in a dedicated chapter in at least one of the companion books. I mean, it just has to be. So I'm going to hold off until I finish the series and look at those books, and if nobody else has done it, then sure, I'll take it on, but that's gotta be like its own section in at least one of the companion books, because it's pretty direct references there. For now, if you're reading along with me and, haven't seen the companion books yet, then I do strongly recommend reading through the Book of Revelation. If you do, I would recommend the King James Version, as we're focused on the literary impact more than we are on just picking the most accessible translation. Seriously, I mean, go read it. I'm pretty sure that Tarmangeddon is just how they pronounce Armageddon in this age. There's also a dragon and a horn. I mean, Robert Jordan was not subtle about his inspiration here. Alright, so I'm just about done here, but even though we didn't see much of Cadsuane from this book, I still haven't really talked about her at all in any of these videos, and I want to at the very least mention some of the stuff I said in comments after the last video. Cadsuane is a fantastic character, but she just never seems to quite fit into the points I'm trying to make, so here's just what I think about Cadsuane right now. To some extent, Cadsuane is just more Aes Sedai than most of the Aes Sedai that we meet. She has the same arrogance that the Aes Sedai consider to be a virtue, but she's not childish or short-sighted about it, as most other Aes Sedai are. She has rules, even for herself, but she also has the wisdom to know when to bend or break them, which many other Aes Sedai lack. She reminds me a lot of the person Egwene's grown into, though I actually think that the way things are going, Egwene's going to wind up even better than Cadsuane by the end of the series. I thought Cadsuane's appraisal of Nynaeve was just absolutely hilarious. A frivolous girl, full of passions, who only rarely demonstrated that she had a brain. Yet she also clearly sees some real potential in Nynaeve. This isn't far off from my own appraisal. Cadsuane's reading of Rand and the way she manipulates him is extremely risky, and she comes very, very close to pushing him too far. But I don't think anything less would have worked. I mean, she was right. She couldn't force him to do as she says, but she could manipulate him into chasing her. For all their supposed talent as manipulators, we really don't see other Aes Sedai do this hardly ever. What's more, we see enough of her reasoning for this manipulation to feel real to me. I get the impression that she wasn't just kind of randomly trying this, or just following a formula she's used with men before. I think she spent a lot of time off screen just kind of looking at the situation, seeing what she could learn about Rand, and then came up with an intentional plan tailor-made for him that actually did exactly what she was hoping it would do. Really, I mentioned Egwene, but the character that Cadsuane reminds me the most of is Moiraine, just a lot more experienced. So stepping back a little bit to look at Cadsuane from sort of outside of the universe as a piece of literature, what sticks out most to me is that she fills a very common trope, the old crone who helps guide the hero. But what I really, really like about her is that Robert Jordan managed to shove a whole bunch of agency into a role that traditionally has basically none. She isn't just sitting around a bubbling cauldron, maybe with a couple of sisters, waiting for a protagonist to seek her out. She's the one that seeks out Rand. What's more, she brings a lot of heroic attitude to the role. Often, the wise woman or crone only helps the hero in exchange for some favor, or in an attempt to trick her, or because he forces her to. Not so for Cadsuane. She's very clear about her motivation. She likes the challenge. She heard that there was an impossible task and it took her right out of retirement. I would associate enjoying the challenge as a motivation for heroes in like the very classic sense. That is a heroic thing to do. I'm not even sure if I can think, certainly not off the top of my head, of another character that sort of fits this role and is anywhere near as badass as Cadsuane. Maybe Kreia from KOTOR 2, but that's not really quite the same thing. Alright, that just about wraps things up. As usual, there's a bunch of just little tiny things I just want to say, just tweet-sized observations, but I don't really want to just have 20 minutes of just firing off individual things. I mean, I have to mention Aviendha saying, "I think you two will make each other melt one day," but then you already played that joke, Brigitte Trahelian. Everyone's always talking about how they don't understand IO humor, and that is one of the best jokes in the entire series. Completely separately, I just absolutely loved the description of the manor in chapter 23. The sitting room was large, but not ornate, like the manor house itself, with cornices of carved wood painted red. The furniture was bright with paint, but not a touch of gilding. The 2 lawn fireplaces, plain stone if well made. The andirons strongly wrought metal, made for lawn service rather than appearances. This is just really cozy, sort of antiquarian. It's such a minor thing. There's just so many things like that in these books where I just love that scene. I just want to spend an hour just living inside that scene. But as I keep saying, I really should wrap this up so I can get started on the next book, New Spring. Yeah, part of me really wants to jump directly to Knife of Dreams, but given that New Spring is next in publish order and that it's just about spring at the end of the book, I think this is about right time to read New Spring. And a few people told me I can skip it, and I'm not going to skip it. We're doing New Spring next. It's a lot shorter than the other books, so hopefully it'll be quicker, but it's kind of hard to say. Actually, reading the book isn't the long part here. It's typing up the script, recording it, editing the video. The reading takes 2 or 3 days, and then everything else takes 2 full weeks. Speaking of the videos, I got a new light set up this time around. I got a softbox, and I'm curious how it looks. I'm doing my best to make each video just a little bit better looking than the previous one, and I'm curious. Is this a step up, step down? As always, please give me feedback on anything about the videos, whether it's the content of the actual stuff I'm saying, or if it's just the way I'm recording it, the way I'm cutting it, how long the quotes are, the references I use, is the summary too long, just anything like that. I really, really appreciate the feedback. I've gotten a little tiny bit so far, and it was really, really helpful, so please, if anything stands out, I've been doing this for long enough now that it feels weird to say that I'm new to this, but I haven't been doing this for more than a few months now, so I still feel like I'm new and I'm kind of figuring out how to best make these videos. So anything you can do to help me, I will really appreciate it. Thanks in advance. And I hope everyone really enjoyed the video. I'll talk to everybody next time. Hopefully just a few weeks, given it's a shorter book, but we'll see how it goes. Till then. Now that most of the world feels like home, the few dark corners we haven't yet seen are all the more disturbing for it. Disturbing, fucking hell.